Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we are exploring a quiet but unsettling aspect of human psychology. Have you ever noticed that some people seem uncomfortable around you, even when you have done nothing wrong? Sometimes the answer has less to do with your actions and more to do with what your presence awakens within them. Let's explore why this happens. Have you ever felt something strange when you realized that certain people seemed uneasy around you despite the fact that you had never truly harmed them? A glance becomes colder. A joke carries an unexpected sharpness. An invisible distance begins to grow. What makes it unsettling is that these feelings are rarely expressed openly. They exist beneath the surface, leaving many people wondering, is the problem really me? From a psychological perspective, people do not always resent you because of something you did. Often, they react to feelings your presence unintentionally brings to the surface. Some become uncomfortable because you challenge the image they have built of themselves. Others feel uneasy when they witness your growth, your independence, or your refusal to live solely for the approval of others. What troubles people most is not always your behavior. Sometimes it is the fact that your existence quietly forces them to confront parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Human beings often react strongly to qualities they have denied within themselves. A person who has suppressed their freedom may feel irritated by someone who lives authentically. Someone trapped in constant stress may feel uncomfortable around a person who remains calm. Someone who struggles to set boundaries may secretly resent a person who confidently says no. The deeper truth is that these reactions are usually unconscious. People rarely stop and ask themselves why they feel disturbed. Instead, they search for flaws in the other person. It feels easier to criticize what reflects their hidden insecurities than to face those insecurities directly. This is why some individuals attract resistance without ever intending to. Their confidence, peace, honesty, or authenticity becomes a mirror. And mirrors can be uncomfortable when they reveal truths people are not ready to see. Throughout history, societies have often rejected those who reflected qualities they secretly feared or suppressed. The same pattern appears in everyday life. When someone embodies a freedom, calmness, or self-acceptance that others have lost, silent tension can emerge. The atmosphere changes. Conversations become colder. Distance grows without explanation. The reality is that people do not always dislike you because of who you are. Sometimes they are reacting to what your presence reminds them about themselves. And perhaps that is one of the most important truths about human nature. The strongest reactions are often directed not at what is visible, but at what remains hidden within the unconscious mind. Human beings often react most strongly to what they secretly long for or desperately try to suppress. The longer something is denied, the more powerful the reaction becomes. Like a room kept locked for years, even a small beam of light can feel overwhelming when it finally enters. Perhaps that is why many people have experienced walking into a room, doing nothing wrong, yet sensing a subtle resistance around them. Not because they were a threat, but because their presence unintentionally disturbed something others had spent years trying to keep hidden. The paradox is simple. The more authentically a person lives, the more likely they are to unsettle those around them. Most people do not hate the truth itself. What they struggle with is the moment truth makes it harder to keep avoiding themselves. Have you ever noticed a relationship changing as you changed internally? Sometimes distance appears not because of conflict, but because growth disrupts old dynamics. People often feel less alone when they realize others have quietly experienced the same transformations. But there is another layer to this. Sometimes your presence does not only challenge hidden emotions, it challenges the social mask people wear every day. From an early age, many of us learn to adapt. We discover which behaviors earn approval, which emotions should remain hidden, and which parts of ourselves seem unacceptable. Over time, adaptation becomes a habit. Eventually, some people become so attached to the version of themselves they present to the world that they forget who they are beneath it. The problem begins when that mask starts to crack. Many people spend years performing roles designed to gain acceptance. They learn how to speak, react, and behave in ways that fit the expectations of their environment. After a while, the performance feels normal. Then someone appears who no longer follows those unwritten rules. No confrontation is necessary. No rebellion is required. Simply being genuine can be enough to make others uncomfortable. When someone stops pretending, it reminds others of how much pretending they may still be doing. This can be seen everywhere. In workplaces, social circles, and communities, people often feel safer when everyone follows the same script. The moment someone steps outside that pattern, an invisible tension emerges. At first, nothing seems different. Then the looks change. Comments become sharper. A subtle distance appears. The discomfort is rarely about the person themselves. More often, it is about what their authenticity reveals. Their presence highlights the gap between who people are and who they feel they should be. And perhaps that is what many people fear most. Not discovering that the world is false, but realizing they have worn a mask for so long that they no longer remember what lies beneath it. Yet not all resentment comes from threatened identities. Sometimes it comes from comparison. There is a quiet form of resentment that exists almost everywhere. It rarely appears as open hostility. Instead, it emerges through subtle remarks, unexpected coldness, or unexplained irritation. The strange part is that you may have done nothing at all. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable simply because your presence reminds them of possibilities they abandoned long ago. Seeing someone pursue growth, peace, confidence, or authenticity can unintentionally awaken old dreams they once carried but never followed. What hurts is not always another person's success. What hurts is being reminded of the version of themselves they hoped to become. Human beings naturally compare themselves to others. When someone embodies qualities we admire but have neglected within ourselves, the comparison can create discomfort. Instead of facing that feeling, some people project it outward. What appears to be resentment is often something much deeper, a silent struggle between the life someone is living and the life they once imagined. And that is why people do not always react to who you are. Sometimes they react to what your existence reminds them they could have been. What makes this dynamic so powerful is that it rarely happens consciously. It moves beneath awareness like an invisible current. When someone appears who is calmer, more disciplined, more focused, or more at peace, comparisons begin automatically. For a person already struggling with insecurity, that presence can unintentionally deepen feelings of inadequacy. That is why people do not always resent those who hurt them. Often, they resent those who make them feel small. There is something fascinating about human nature. The less people possess a certain quality within themselves, the more sensitive they become to those who embody it naturally. Someone living in constant inner chaos may feel disturbed by another person's peace. Someone who doubts their worth may react strongly to someone who carries quiet confidence. Someone who never pursued their true desires may feel uncomfortable around those who have the courage to follow their own path. The irony is that the other person does not need to boast or prove anything. Sometimes their calm presence alone is enough. Like a mirror reflecting what has been ignored for years, it is not the mirror that causes discomfort, but what it reveals. This pattern is visible everywhere, especially in today's world of constant comparison. People are surrounded by images of success, confidence, happiness, and achievement. The problem is that many do not simply observe these lives, they compare them to their own. Every comparison quietly measures what feels missing. Instead of turning that discomfort into growth, some choose an easier path. They criticize, judge, mock, or secretly hope others fail. If the person they compare themselves to falls, they no longer have to face their own unresolved frustrations. This is why personal growth sometimes creates unexpected distance in relationships. As someone becomes more disciplined, healthier, emotionally stable, or focused, certain people may begin reacting differently. Not because the change is harmful, but because it highlights areas of their own lives they have avoided confronting. Human beings often react strongly to anything that challenges the image they hold of themselves. Sometimes the mere presence of a person who is emotionally mature, self-aware, or moving forward in life can awaken hidden insecurities in others. In a world driven by comparison, many people measure their value relative to everyone around them. When someone grows, finds clarity, or becomes more confident, it can feel as though their own worth is shrinking. That is often where resentment begins. But there is another reason relationships sometimes change. Not everyone misses you when you leave. Sometimes they miss the emotional support you used to provide. Many relationships do not end through arguments or betrayal. They simply begin to shift when one person stops giving what the other had grown accustomed to receiving. For years, some people rely on others for comfort, reassurance, attention, or emotional stability. They become so accustomed to that support that they stop recognizing it as a gift. It begins to feel permanent. Then something changes. The person who was always available starts setting boundaries. The person who always listened begins listening to themselves. The person who constantly carried other people's emotional burdens finally decides to protect their own peace. Suddenly, the relationship feels different. Complaints appear. Distance grows. Frustration emerges. The issue is often not a lack of affection. It is the loss of a familiar source of emotional comfort. Many relationships operate through invisible exchanges of energy. Some people become dependent on your attention, your reassurance, or your ability to calm their inner chaos. When that energy is no longer freely available, they may experience discomfort without fully understanding why. This is why people sometimes react negatively when you begin prioritizing yourself. Not because you became selfish, but because you stopped sacrificing your well-being to maintain their emotional balance. A person who was always available may suddenly be called distant. A person who learns boundaries may be called cold. A person who finally protects their peace may be accused of changing. The painful truth is that not everyone loves you for who you are. Some love the comfort, stability, or validation they receive from you. And perhaps one of the hardest lessons of growth is realizing that certain relationships were built more on dependency than genuine connection. But the deepest transformation happens when you begin changing from within. There comes a moment when a person grows tired of living entirely for approval. They no longer want to shape themselves around the expectations of others. They begin searching for something more authentic. This is where true inner growth begins. Instead of building identity around acceptance, they begin building it around self-understanding. They stop asking, "How can I be liked?" and start asking, "Who am I really?" At first, the changes seem small. They stop explaining themselves constantly. They stop seeking agreement from everyone. They stop treating every opinion as a measure of their worth. A quiet confidence begins to emerge. The challenge is that this transformation often makes people uncomfortable. Many individuals build their identity around external validation. They feel safest when everyone shares the same need for approval, acceptance, and belonging. When someone steps outside that cycle, it unintentionally exposes how dependent others may still be on it. That is why people often say, "You've changed." And in many ways, they are right. You have changed. Not because you became arrogant, but because you became more aligned with yourself. You no longer need the same validation. You no longer shape your life around keeping everyone comfortable. As a result, some relationships naturally drift apart. Growth often brings loneliness, not because you become superior to others, but because your priorities begin changing. You start valuing depth over popularity, authenticity over image, and meaningful connection over constant approval. Perhaps that is what disturbs some people the most. Not that you are better than them, but that you are learning how to live without the validation they still depend on. And maybe one of the clearest signs of genuine growth is not that everyone likes you more. It is that some people become uncomfortable without fully understanding why. Because maturity was never about keeping everyone happy. Sometimes it is simply the courage to live truthfully, even if a few relationships quietly fade along the way. And perhaps that is where we will leave today's reflection. Not every person who grows will be understood. Not every relationship will survive the changes that come with becoming more authentic. Sometimes the very qualities that bring you closer to yourself can create distance between you and those who were only comfortable with the version of you that never changed. But that does not mean you are moving in the wrong direction. Growth has always required a certain amount of courage. The courage to disappoint expectations, to outgrow old identities, and to continue walking your path even when not everyone chooses to walk beside you. So if you have felt misunderstood lately, if certain relationships have shifted as you have changed from within, remember this: not every door that closes is a loss. Sometimes it is simply a sign that you are no longer meant to live inside the same psychological space you once occupied. Thank you for spending these moments here together. If this conversation resonated with you, consider sharing your thoughts below. Your story may be the reminder someone else needs to realize they are not alone in their own journey of transformation. Until next time, take care of your mind, protect your inner peace, and continue becoming the person you were always meant to be.